Hey everyone, it's Matt Williams from the Drone Business Show. Thanks for joining us. And today it's my pleasure to introduce our very special guest for this episode, David Holmes. David, thank you for joining us, sir.
Happy to do that. Thanks for inviting me, Matt. It's amazing what we can do on LinkedIn, isn't it?
It is. It's awesome, eh? And that's it, right? Starting off is hit us with a truth bomb straight away. If you're not already, get yourselves on LinkedIn. Follow David. Follow me. Check out the Drone Business Show. It's the place to do business now, isn't it? Really.
Fully. I mean, we'd spent quite a lot of time messing about with Insta and Facebook and all of those sort of things. But actually, if you want to be business to business, I think LinkedIn is the way to do it. I have to say I'm not an expert on it at all, but good way of connecting with people, definitely.
Big time. That's it. Well, David, like I say, thanks for joining us, mate. It's much appreciated. You've been kind of, in and around the ecosystem doing and worked with myself in the past on the business side of things and the regulatory side of things. And, it's amazing to have people such as yourself on who, hopefully a lot of the listeners are trying to be where you are, right? Lots of our people, and it's funny, we had Dave with his drone from down the road as a running joke, right? We've got Dave with his drone on the other end of the camera today. So, so people are trying to get to where you are now, right? And we're going to get that out as we talk over the next kind of half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it ends up being. But till you get bored of me, but it's been amazing to see your journey and actually amazing to see where you've got to, right? Like the size of your company, InView Assets. Do you put the assets in there as well? Yeah. And I'll get you to explain in a second what it is that you guys do and how big the team is and all that sort of stuff. But seeing how you can go from, and again, leaning into your background, I think quite heavily in the direction you've gone, which is one of those other things that we teach to people a lot, is really interesting. And I'd like you to just, if you would, mate, explain to us what your company is now and how many people you employ and what it is that you do. And then we'll take a step backwards and we'll go through the journey chronologically, if that's okay, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. I guess we are atypical in the drone space in the UK in terms of size of company because most companies, as you know, Matt, are, in my experience, are single operators, potentially hobbyists as well. And we've made that leap from being in that space into actually employing people. We're not a big company at all. I think people think we're bigger than we are. But actually, and that's to do with presence online and how you promote yourself on your website and things like that.
Yep.
But we effectively have 3 employees and then we have subcontractors who we list on our website, who we would effectively call partners. And those are on zero contract hours, and they will do a range of work for us from data capture, but also supporting us with health and safety things, and critically with kind of data processing and handover of data to clients as well. Because it's actually quite easy to get drone pilots to sub for you, but that kind of client liaison stuff is a little bit harder to do. So yeah, I think we're trying to promote a brand that's a bit bigger than we really are. Perhaps I'm misselling what we are, Matt, and you won't have me back again because you think we're bigger than we are. I don't know. We've certainly moved out of that one man in his drone space into something which is bigger. And we've got ambitions to grow quite a lot more. And that growth would be around obviously more work and more clients, but it would be largely around an outsourcing model. And one of the things I've done as part of the business development, the BD, is reached out to lots of people and begun to nurture them so that they can work with us and can work in our workflows. Because critically, we want to have good quality and trusted people to do that.
Amazing, mate. All of the words you're saying, it's like soundbite after soundbite after soundbite. It's like all the things that I have been teaching to people for so long, and I put in all of the blog posts that we've got on the New Drone Business Network website, and all of the training we've got coming, all the YouTube videos that I'm, in the process of producing at the moment. It's all about all of these words you're saying. Nurturing clients, having a customer relationship, having partners that you can collaborate with, so that you can deliver more, and actually gives them the opportunity to deliver more. It fills everybody's diary, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to not look bigger than you are, but to look more professional. Because actually, if those people are genuine partners, if they are going to white label for you, then yes, you don't employ them necessarily as full-time staff, but they're there to work with you and for you as and when you need to. So I think, it's actually it's a really interesting marketing strategy.
And I think one of the things just to add is that the other way that we're nurturing people is we also, we're based down in southwest England, and we've got strong connections with a couple of universities down here. And we teach, or I say teach, we support and do some teaching on a master's level degree course, which is all about GIS and geospatial tech. And part of that, there's a component of a module which we've been asked to deliver is effectively about kind of data capture. The students who are on it they use a separate company to learn how to fly drones, but they get us in to talk about how you go from kind of doing a job to delivering a job and getting the outputs for the client. And that's been really interesting for us. And one of the key things we've done on that is we've kept contact with all of those students we've been with on LinkedIn, because we see them as a pool of talent in the future, particularly if they're going to be kind of portfolio workers. They might have different things if we know that they can do things in a certain way. So I think getting into initially into your regional networks. And, we've been quite fortunate that down in Somerset here, they're trying to promote the county as not being all about cheese and cider, but actually as aerospace, believe it or not. And so we've been involved in that discussion, even though really, we're tiny in this. We're not Leonardo. We don't do helicopters and things like that. But getting into those spaces and beginning to network with people who think you're a trusted partner and a trusted brand definitely pays dividends in my world.
Interesting, because you become the person, like you say, once you become trusted by them, and you're the person. You mentioned it at the very beginning. Things like LinkedIn. Once people start to hear about you and they start to see you delivering value and as someone that other people trust, all of a sudden those trust signals that go out are massive, and it brings in additional work. Right? You touched on something in there that's really important. So, and I'm going to roll back to it in a second. I just would like you, if possible, to describe to people listening what it is that InView Assets does. What does your company deliver?
Okay. So the first thing, Matt, is, and I said this on LinkedIn to you, we don't talk about drones. So we do use drones, and we also use ground-based laser scanning as well to deliver some project work. But we would really talk about ourselves as being a turnkey digital data capture company. Now that's a right old mouthful. Yeah. And of course, if you talk to a client, they go, "What's that? I don't know. I've got no idea." And then you have to, unpack it and begin to explain. But we have really moved into I would say, consultative selling approach, where when we engage with a client, we don't try and show them all our fancy models or show them all of our kit or anything like that, or get geeky about it all. We listen to what's their sector, what's their industry, what compliance things have we got, and we have an initial kind of discussion with them and try and understand their pain points. We really want to find out what problem our technology can solve. And then if we can manage to get another meeting, we'll use a combination of that discussion together with AI to produce quite a detailed unpacking of that sector so that we can begin to understand it a lot more. And that will be all the regulatory stuff. So, for instance, we've done a lot of work at Bristol Airport. And we've been really lucky to get in there. Don't get me wrong. It was through the local Chamber of Commerce about 3 years ago. There's a funny story about how we got an introduction to them and the first piece of work that they asked us to do. Because we thought we'd go in there and start, doing some runway inspection with them and stuff like that. And we got talking to the senior team, and it became very soon in that meeting that what they wanted us to do was fly over a piece of land next to the airport that they were looking to acquire as part of their expansion. But they clearly had a conflict with the landowner and they couldn't get permission to do it. So they wanted us to basically fly high and take some photos of someone else's land. And of course, technically we can do that. They don't own the airspace, and all the regs around that. But that wasn't and we didn't do it at that time, actually. We said, no, we'd like to build a relationship for you before we start doing that. But that was a foot in the door. And I think that once we delivered a project there, we did a lot of digital data capture, producing 3D models of surfaces and topo maps. It became really clear to the client that there was much more value in that data than simply the photogrammetry output, that they could actually share that data across the silos in their organization, from engineering to space planning to health and safety, and they were all getting a lot of value. And that would be really difficult to explain that in an initial client meeting, because people go in there and start showing pictures of drones, as I said before, and talking about the technology. And it's about doing it differently and being on a journey and a trusted partner with that client.
Yeah, so good, mate. I hope for anyone listening, like, they're getting all of these, like I say, literal value bombs, these gold nuggets that you keep dropping. Starting off with that whole delivering a solution, not flying a drone, although that is the vehicle that you are figuratively and I suppose literally using to capture the data some of the time, not all the time, because you do a lot of ground truthing and groundwork from what you've said. But it's also things like, going in and you mentioned pain points. This is a huge thing when you're trying to sell, right? Absolute gold, because people don't care about the drone. All they care about, think about it when you're looking at buying something yourself, right? Like when you go out and make a buying decision for something, fairly big, or maybe even a service that you want. Like, I don't know, on the top of my head, the boiler's broken down. You don't care that you can get someone out to a heating engineer to come out and service your boiler and blah, blah, do all of the, I'm going to improve the efficiency and all this sort of stuff. When your boiler has broken down and it's the middle of winter, the one thing you need right there and then is to get the heating back on, right? So actually your pain at that point, what the thing you're going to type into Google or look on LinkedIn or whatever it might be to find the person who's going to solve that problem is, can someone fix my heating? How, is there a plumber who can fix my boiler today? Emergency plumber. And it's that slight change in the marketing and how you sell the product that you're using, and it's how do you deliver the value? How do you solve a pain point for a client and deliver value to them? And I think that for me is one of the reasons that you guys are probably doing so well. You've moved from, we use a drone to capture photos, make photogrammetry, make 3D models, do site surveys, blah, 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 to this is what we do. We take this pain away, or we improve, we reduce the risk by our processes, or we can deliver the data more quickly, although faster isn't necessarily a great selling point all the time. But doing it more efficiently, more cost effectively with lower risk is massive, particularly in the business to business space that you guys operate in. And as soon as you can make that change in mindset, I think you set yourself up for big wins in the future, right?
I mean, I think the other thing that we've learned, and this is relatively recently in the last year or so, is that you also need to be consultative with the client about the way you're going to deliver the data as well. I mean, we learned several years ago that there was zero point really in giving a kind of massive Dropbox full of images to a client. There's no value in it to the client. So they had to be contextually sorted out, and there were lots of, as many people listening to this will know, there are lots of online service solutions out there in varying degrees of cost that go from free to very expensive that will allow you to host your data for your client. But you need to be, I think you need to be consultative about that, because the client just doesn't understand any of these things, and they will have issues around the longevity of that data. They don't want to pay for another software solution. They will have issues or questions about who owns that data. And also they'll have questions about, is it safe? Where's it hosted? And you have to navigate those quite choppy waters to the client to become trusted, saying, I'm not selling any of these solutions for you. I'm giving you the options. You make the decision. There are different price points. There are different value propositions for it. But I think without that, you can't deliver your outputs to the client, because you're dealing with such huge amounts of data. And again, going back to some of our clients, we do a lot of work at universities. At some universities, we've collected more than a terabyte of data for them.
Wow.
And, you know, if you say to them, well, you know, give us a link to your Dropbox or your OneDrive, they're not going to be able to handle that amount of data. So part of it is what I like to call the data stewardship. How do you work with them on that journey as well?
I like that. Oh, mate, I hope you trademark that data stewardship piece. That's amazing. Look at this. Yeah, that's interesting. So we used to do a lot of wind turbine inspections and electricity kind of infrastructure inspections back in the day, 2016, 2017, before it became a bit more mainstream. And now a lot of that is automated or kind of semi-autonomous, if not automated, to a high degree. And one of the big things we found, very similar to yourself, you know, we were capturing really high-res images with Sony A5 cameras that we could manually zoom and things like that to look at problem areas. And we worked with the university at the time because the problem we saw was a big data problem, right? Like you capture so much stuff, but the client doesn't care about the terabytes of footage or video or whatever it is. Actually, our client, the power distribution networks at the time, all they cared about was, where do we need to send a crew out because the trees or ivy crawling up the side of the transformer towers are too close to the power lines, such that when we get a storm coming through in the winter, that it's going to touch the power lines. That's all they cared about. So we worked with a university, and I think one of the reasons we captured a huge kind of percentage of the contract at the time, we worked with a local university, which Oxford University, that's where we were based, and we got some of their AI software engineers on courses there. This is before AI became a thing, right? And we've all got it at our fingertips now. And we actually worked with them to create a piece of software that took all of the data we captured, and it would effectively give a red, an amber, or a green. And we had red photos, which meant that there was vegetation within 6 feet of the power lines. If it was amber, it was 6 to 10 feet. And if it was green, it was 10 or more feet away. And that meant then that the power distribution network operators only had to go out to the red areas as a priority.
Yeah.
They could send people in the next 12 months to the amber areas, and they could forget about the green areas and just send us to go and capture them again in 12 months' time. And that was an absolute game changer, you know. And yeah, so I think, like you say, it's about the data and how you handle it. And
but you've illustrated again that was the client's pain point, wasn't it? The pain point was about that vegetation touching the power cables because it's going to bring down the network, or it presents a risk to it. And they're only interested in whether you can tell them where that is cheaper than their current method and safer.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
You got the solution. And they wouldn't be interested in your Sony camera. I know you're interested in it, Matt, but they don't care. So it was all about solving that problem, wasn't it? But it would take a long way. I would imagine that took a long time to find a relationship with those power companies, whoever it is, to find out what that problem was and how you could have a solution with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
No, I mean, it took a lot to get that in the first place, because particularly big companies, they're kind of resistant to change, I would say.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you then get your foot in the door, you've got to deliver safely, and like you guys, you know, come across as professional, take the time to understand. I love that idea, that concept you're using of this consultative approach to things, because it's not just about us. They're the experts in their world, we're the experts in our world. Well, how do we combine that expertise and end up delivering more capability really than we would both do alone? Like, they could buy a drone and go up and take photographs, you know, but why would they come to us and get us to do that for them?
We think when we're engaging with a new client that in order to have a successful sale, and sometimes the time to get a sale can take months, if not years. And I know that's a depressing thought because you've got cash flow challenges.
Yeah.
But that sales cycle can be a long time. and you've got to be in it for that sort of duration to do that. But we think when we approach organizations, we need an ambassador who's a sort of an operational level, who understands what you're doing. They understand the technology and they like the technology and they kind of get it. But you also need to have buy-in at a really senior level from a kind of, chief CFO, chief financial person, or even a CEO level, where they'll say, actually, I can see the benefit of this. Let's just do it, and we'll find the money for it. And we've tried to engineer our business where we're not seen as a one-off service provider, as in going in and taking pictures of people's roofs, even if you did that lots of times, but actually a partner with them where we get repeated business. That's not easy to do, and that's aspirational, but that for us is a really big change, moving in that direction.
Yeah. And how do you kind of manage that piece? Like, one of the things that I actually a couple of days, if people are listening to this live, but if you're listening to this in the future, a couple of days after this comes out, I've actually got a whole video that talks about partnerships, and for us, with the people that I'm targeting with that, it's about asking people for referrals more than anything, because it's a lot of B2C work and probably a little bit of B2B, but getting that referrals piece is really important, as well as a testimonial if you can. How do you guys go about that in a more professional way when you get to that next level where people are aspiring to be, so that you're working with these blue chips and corporates potentially? What puzzle pieces have you put in place that mean that works?
I don't know if we have got ones that work necessarily. I think it's
Okay.
a huge amount of legwork. So use AI for digging out connections on LinkedIn as well. And we've got LinkedIn Premium, which means it gives you, I don't understand it really, Sales Navigator and all of that. I'm sure it's value for money, but anyway. But, we see the value in LinkedIn, but we also have those, I think you referred to really, what I would call those warm connections. So if we've done a piece of work with someone at an institution, once we get to know them, we'll say, can you get us an introduction to this person? Because in the sectors we're working in, particularly in things like airports and ports and marine, they seem to know each other. There's quite small connections, particularly if you're, we're mostly at a regional level in the southwest. Lots of people know each other, and so it's nurturing those soft leads. And you'll know, Matt, that a lot of these don't lead anywhere. You send out emails, you send out connections, but sometimes you'll send out something and then a year later someone will get back to you and say, oh, I remember you said you were going to do that. So I think it's definitely difficult to do it. But if you think of in an organization or in a company our size, I'm not doing a lot of flying anymore. I do enough to keep my currency in, and so that I don't get ribbed by my colleagues that I can't fly a drone anymore. But most of what I'm trying to do is business development, seeking those leads, doing the meetings with clients, and trying to make sure that we're getting we're getting some income coming in to be able to do that. And I have another colleague who's at the same sort of effectively the same level as me in the business, and that's what we spend a lot of time doing. But I think there's quite a leap to move from being a single operator to get into that space. And if you're a single operator, think about how much time you're going to spend flying your drone and getting money versus that business development. And there's always going to be a conflict, because I actually think if you want to move up the ladder a bit, you have to spend a lot more time doing business development than you do flying your drone.
Yeah. And that is the reality, right? Like, everyone, I think, myself included, came into the drone industry thinking, oh, I'm going to be out. At the time it was model helicopters with cameras on. That's what we were doing when we first started. I thought I'd be out on film sets doing that all day, every day. But actually very quickly realized that for me, and I think for most people in the end, as you build a business that becomes more sustainable and scalable, I certainly found that I was doing probably 80% of my work was business development, marketing, that kind of thing. And 20% was the drone side of things. To the point that in the end, actually, I kind of ended up having to stop the drone piece because we were earning we were making so much money because of the marketing that I was doing and the BD I was doing, that we had other pilots that I could bring in. And similar to
Yeah.
yourself, we started off by contracting those pilots in, and they white labeled for us. So they were on the website because they were our pilots. They'd been trained and kind of certified and qualified by myself and our company at the time. And they ended up going out and doing the work for us. And then when we moved away from the operational side, I actually gave all of our contracts to those pilots and the companies that they had. So, it's
And I think that's a bit of a key to scaling, really, is that, and if I had my time again, I probably would have thought about that more, is that if you've got enough volume of work and you can begin to think, well, actually I can, and you know that you've got someone you can work with who you trust, you can begin to subcontract some of that work as long as your profit margin is sufficient on that work for whatever you think is appropriate. You can then take yourself a bit out of the loop, can't you? And then you can begin to do that business development. And I think if you don't think like that, you'll forever be chasing your tail because someone will ring you up and want a drone job and you'll go out and do it. And actually, strategically, you've got to leap away from that and say, I can find other people who will fly the drone for me or do the data capture. I obviously need to worry about the quality of some of that and all of those things. But that to me is a sort of a stepping stone to getting away from where most drone companies are, single operators, into actually we've got a small team beneath us. And it lowers the risk if you're not actually employing anyone at that point, if you're just operating more as almost like a collaborative group that you do things together in.
That's it. I think I had James Singleton on the first episode of the Drone Business Show, and he's an FPV pilot. Go and listen to that episode because there's some quite interesting bits in there if you haven't heard it already. But James has done a similar thing. He's partnered with other people, other drone pilots, and actually if there's work he can do that they can't, they'll draft him in and he'll wear their t-shirt and all that sort of stuff, and vice versa. And it just helps everybody get more work all the time. And I think that kind of rising tide raises all boats, right, is a phrase that I turn to quite often in this space in particular. I think the other one is, and that's, so the way you've just suggested it is exactly the way I did it, and the way I recommend to people is like, look, that now, to be honest, for the majority of us, flying the drone is the easy part. It's what you can bring to your clients or to your business, which is what makes you different to other people. Because most people, let's face it, are flying similar drones now. All these drones pretty much can fly hands off. They can probably, well, the drones now can fly themselves better than I could fly them when we were flying manual drones, even though I'd got thousands of hours and 30 years of model flying experience beforehand, So you haven't got that kind of unique selling point anymore, isn't you as the operator. So that's the way I would do it, is exactly what you suggested. Get other people in, make sure that they are capable of delivering it how you are, make sure that they've been shown by you how you interact with your clients and you want them to represent you and let them crack on. But I suppose the other way around is possible as well, potentially, where you could, if you just want to stay as a flying pilot, you could do that. But you're going to have to find a way to build relationships with other people who are doing the business development. You're not going to, it's probably more difficult, I think, to get a business development person in, because they're going to want probably a fair chunk of money, to be brutally honest, to be able to do a good job anyway, to allow you to keep flying. So that is one of the realities, isn't it, of starting off in this business.
And it is. And I think if you go the latter way you're talking about, if you are really wanting to scale the business in a way where you think you're going to exit with some value from it in a few years' time, which I know not everyone wants to do. Sometimes these are more lifestyle businesses, but we would like to do that. Whether we will, I don't know, Matt, probably not. But but you've got to be careful if you get people involved who are integral to your business, in that they have got a lot of skin in the game. They're going to want equity in what you're doing. So what I mean by that, obviously, is they're going to want some shares, some percentages. And you need to, I think, be really careful about that, because if you start giving away your company when it's really young, 20% or whatever might not sound a lot, but if it grew to be a scalable company and it has a valuation which is in the millions, you're suddenly giving away hundreds of thousands of pounds, where there was an unintended consequence early on. And my feeling is that probably that BD should rest with you more, because that's kind of integral to how the business grows, whereas it's easier to outsource the piloting. The other thing I want to say about the piloting that I've noticed is, which I think is a really key benefit, if you work with someone else, they'll have a different workflow probably, and they'll have a different way of doing it. And you always learn from going out and going, oh, I didn't know you could do it like that. Or that's a much better way of doing it than I ever thought about doing it. And I think that collaborative nature is really important for honing all of your sort of things, from doing, setting up how to fly the drone, to pre-programming and planning, all the way through to execution and talking to people about how they deliver data to clients. Because I think most drone operators are pretty happy to share what they're doing. And I feel that's a really important piece in that kind of growing journey of talking to people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that in aviation all the time, right? It's why, I would go so far as to say I'm a very experienced, full-sized pilot with everything I've done over the years, in addition to the drone side of things. But this summer, for example, I've had my private pilot's license for 25 years now, and thousands of military instructional hours teaching other people how to fly. But this summer, I actually went and did 20 hours of flight training at my local flying school here in Canada on a Cessna 172, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to, because I wanted to learn how to operate in Canadian airspace, what, additional factors to think about because of the distances involved in traveling in Canada and all that sort of stuff that I perhaps wouldn't have been aware of, even though I've flown all over the world. And I think that's really important, but it's even more so important in business, as you say. And so learning those practices, the safety pieces, the way to be more efficient, other people is the best way to get that. And I think that also then flows over into the business side, right?
Yeah.
Like being open to listen to things like this, to listen to two guys that you may have never met, you may never meet, talking about business and mindset and all that sort of stuff for 40 minutes, 45 minutes a week is potentially going to earn you millions in the future, and certainly save you a lot of time by kind of learning from the mistakes that other people have made and the things they found that work really well.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you wanted me to say something cerebral there, Matt.
No, not at all. I think it's just interesting, right? Like when I tried to kind of 10 years ago or so, accept that it was that I needed to learn how to learn.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I didn't know, and all those kind of things. And all of a sudden you're like, there is so much, there's so many other ways I can do everything, and how I can learn how to learn again. And it's just mind blowing how much progress and how big you can build your business and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And
when
you know
from
building a, UAV hub, a fair sized business, that there is a huge amount to business development, which, from all sorts of stuff around marketing and all of those things, but also all the legal things, all your terms and conditions, your insurance, and all of those things that suddenly, when you move away from being a one-man band into a different space, that there are additional challenges with that. And I think it's, again, talking to people in the community is really important in helping you overcome those, or finding out what their solution is. I mean, we had a lot of trouble, 2 years ago or so, for finding things like public indemnity insurance, not liability, so if you crash the drone, but public indemnity, because essentially we are a drone company. And as soon as you start mentioning drones to insurance companies, they think they are, for some reason, insuring risk of drones as well. And actually, we're really more like a surveying company in reality. But if you're working with big clients, you need that public indemnity. So if you make a mistake, they can't come if they can, try and sue you, but you're covered by insurance. So there are lots of other things which I'd never thought about, which are kind of quite important in that business space.
Yeah, it's one of the things actually that I've always suggested to all my coaching clients and to everyone I've taught, and I've always pushed quite hard, is to look at insurance as an investment in your future, particularly when it comes to things like public liability, particularly when it comes to things like professional and private indemnity. Because if you go and do a job for a client, particularly in your space with the infrastructure piece and the
Yeah.
actionable data. If the data you've delivered is incorrect or not qualified or properly or whatever it might be, then and decisions or quantity surveys are done based on the data you've delivered and it's inaccurate, you need to have that insurance to protect yourselves in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So
I think the
super
other thing,
important.
which is, I'm sure we'll mention it later in the call, Matt, but just about, there are lots of people on LinkedIn and on social media who talk a lot about drones, and they talk about, which is related to this part of the conversation, about accuracy and precision. And they really are things that you need to be very careful about stating to clients. So our normal workflow is we have some quality policies that are publicly available, and we also essentially follow a RICS workflow for our surveying, and we're TSA members as well, so Survey Association members. But we would never quote our data ever as being down to the level of precision that DJI would quote for our drones, which is like, people say it's centimeter level accurate. You've got to be really careful in understanding that difference between accuracy, which is the actual position on the ground of something, and precision, which is that measured distance between 2 points, because clients don't understand that. And then make sure that when you deliver outputs that you are quoting what you think your accuracy is way above, as in with some ceiling on it, above what you really think it is. So normally we're talking about 5 centimeters for what we do. And we normally would get within 2 or 3 centimeters of that. But you're combining data with things like, your quality reports from your photogrammetry, but you've got to be really careful not to oversell and, give too much BS really with how good your stuff is. Because I think it's a problem within the sector.
Big time. And I think, and actually it's really interesting you mentioned that, because, a lot of people, I think, get into the surveying mapping space with drones because the drone will do it now. And like you say, it's plus or minus 2 centimeters on the Z axis and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, cool, awesome. And then you start to talk to people about relative accuracy and absolute accuracy and things like that. And they just don't know what you're asking them. And all of a sudden things unravel very quickly. And I think, like you say, you've got to be very careful about the route that you end up going down, and are you actually potentially qualified to be able to do that? I think, just so everyone can understand, would you mind just talking through like how you've gone from, when we first met and you were getting up and running and getting your licenses or qualifications and certifications, and where you are now? Like, what was your background that led you into this? What was your thought process, and what's the journey been like?
Yeah, okay. So my background is one of a geography educator. So I have a degree in geography and a master's degree in environmental science, but I've always had an interest in, I suppose, geospatial technologies. I'm a bit of a geek, and I used to teach geography a long time ago in a school, and I then became a geography consultant and would go into schools, supporting them on basically improving results. So I used to set A-level and GCSE geography papers and write books, and it's almost like a completely different world, but not totally. And then in about 2018, 2017, I think I got a DJI Spark because I thought that'd be a fun Christmas present and quite liked it. And then sort of round about pre-pandemic time, so 2019, 2020, thought about, could I have a side hustle, set up something with a colleague of mine who was another teacher down the road, local friend, based on that. And it soon became obvious, even, I suppose, with the pandemic, even at the same time, that what was clear is that for 2 people to earn anything like a reasonable amount of money, and I wasn't even talking about minimum wage there, I was thinking of something half decent, but you would have to do more than take pictures of people's chimneys. That was not the value proposition, because you were always going to be B2C, business to consumer. And you were always going to have hassle with people not paying you, or you have to spend most of your time driving around to people's houses. So I thought at that time that the way to do this, and this is really off the back of what you were talking about, Matt, when we were in UAV Hub, was we had to add more value. And the value was from the surveying, the geospatial element. I thought, well, I know a bit about that. How can I do that? So my journey was then to sort of almost retrain myself and think about how as a business can we change what we're doing into something where we're offering survey outputs which are critically going to be, I suppose, if this is the right word, interoperable. They could be used as CAD work as well. So I had to work out how to do that. And that was a tricky journey, I have to say. And it's still something we're learning. But we think we've got a really robust workflow for doing that. And it means that when we are working with clients now, in order to get that kind of quality piece, we always have sort of 3 or 4 set types of flights that we will do in areas in order to make sure we've got enough drone photos to be able to produce a range of outputs. But going back to the sort of the middle part of this, where was I in pandemic? When we started off, and this was a guy who's no longer in the business, he's gone back to teaching, we would get, I don't know, 1 or 2 jobs a month, and we were doing them at the weekend because we were hobbyists. And that was, there was value in that because we were learning how to fly a drone and being comfortable with, oh no, this one's near the railway. We're going to have to find out how to contact Network Rail and then go and look like we're important and wear hard hats and things like that to do this. So there was all of that logistical bit, but we hadn't built any client relationships. So our next step was to think, how do I move this on? And I got in another guy who'd set up essentially as an entrepreneur. He's still my business partner now. He'd set up lots of different businesses in the past. He knew nothing about drones, probably still hates them now, but knows about business. And he essentially made us rebrand the business. So we're still actually Southwest Aerial Surveys Limited, but we trade as InView Assets. And it was all about thinking, where is that value that we can bring to customers? And we started off by kind of going out on the road, doing some local sort of network chamber of commerce events and things like that. That was a route in. Then going to things like, drone shows in London, like the Geospatial, the GeoBusiness show and things like that. And critically, we also joined RPAS as well, who are in the UK, the sort of drone trade body. And those began to give us connections, and those were critical in developing the business. And from then, as we said earlier, we then began to sort of think about what we should be talking about on LinkedIn, and moving away from just talking about drones and outputs into trying to get some value about the sort of challenges we're overcoming, how we do surveying and things like that. And I'm always on LinkedIn now, trying to sort of repost things that I think people are saying about the drone sector, which I personally believe in, around all of those things we've been talking about in terms of value. And there's several people on LinkedIn who've got some really good YouTube channels where you can essentially learn how to do these skills in a robust way. And I think the other thing that we learn is that we needed to build a portfolio of lots of different bits of work, but we weren't going to get paid to do it. So we were prepared to go out and do data capture, get some permissions for doing historic buildings or parts of factories and things where we get landowner permissions, but they're not going to pay us anything. Because then we have a bit of credibility. We can show things to potential clients, say, look, this is what you could have. And that's how we did it. And I think the final piece in the jigsaw was about 18 months ago, through our contacts at Exeter University. They have a thing down here in the southwest across 6 or 7 universities, which is basically a business accelerator program, free to get on. And you get mentoring and business advice. It's almost like a kind of slimmed down MBA, I think. That's how I describe it, but it's for free. And it's been really, really amazingly important to do it. And we've had things like sort of coaching from people. We've had students who have worked with us as well to sort of look at our business and try and think about things and what's the value of AI in our business and things like that. So they're looking at things from a different perspective. I have to say that, that I'm making the story sound like it's been wonderful and it's joyous and it's straightforward. It's not.
Yeah.
It's still not now. And we would like more work and we would like more cash, for being honest. There's a lot of competition out there. You have to work on your value and your business relationships. But we're confident that we sort of know a bit more now about how to approach people and develop that bit of the business. So fingers crossed.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. It's really powerful, I think, for people to be able to hear. The main points coming out of that I picked up on, certainly, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it's like it's all about networking and relationships.
Definitely.
It's all about having that bigger picture view of the end goal and working out how you go from the here and now to the end goal that you're looking for. But then also it's having the kind of tenacity almost and the ability to have a thick enough skin to accept the no's and the rejections and all that sort of stuff and the objections, but to be able to ride out those patches in between where it might be quieter than you want it to be, or, you have, and the other thing, and I talked about it with James, I talk about it a lot with my coaching clients, and I feel it myself, right? As an entrepreneur, as someone building businesses, it's quite a lonely place a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It feels quite lonely. And that's why we're trying to build this network and have these conversations, because actually the more people we have that are going through the same thing, a problem shared is a problem halved, right? And yeah.
And I would say the other thing to do is you have to watch cash flow. We spend a lot of I think a lot of cash on things like software, which you kind of need for the business. But there are ways around that there are, when you're starting out, there are lots of good open source software. They're a bit more clunky and they're not quite as good as the other stuff. But look at that so that you're not handing over to Swiss companies kind of $3 or $4 grand a year to do stuff, or we use Terra for some of our processing workflows, and that's just had a massive hike in price because they're now doing Gaussian splatting and all of this sort of stuff. And I think the other thing is when you peruse LinkedIn as well, and this, Matt, is that this is one of the comments I made to you earlier, is that there's always people talking about how they've got the latest and the greatest drone. I would say that probably the Phantom that you can remember of old with its mechanical shutter, it takes as good a photos as the Mavic 4E. Yeah, it's basically the same kit, but in a different package. And you could probably pick up a Phantom for 200 quid or something. I don't know, something like that. And actually, if the client doesn't care about it, it's not like the client's going to come along and go, "Oh, I don't like that drone. That looks a bit old." If it delivers the same output and it's costing you a fraction of it, of the cost, I don't see why you wouldn't do that. And for jobs where we need something different, we hire the drones. Because it's having expensive drones is like buying a new car, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, the depreciation's outrageous.
It is. It's like, hang on, I paid 10 grand for this, and it's now worth 6, and I've had 2 months or something. So yeah. So think smartly about managing cash flow.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for raising that. For me, the way I try and kind of get that message across to people is look at it as like try and dissociate yourself, because we all, and I think a lot of people get into this because they want the shiny new toy. They want actually a reason to justify buying the latest DJI thing, and I can write it off as a business expense. Brilliant, which is great until you realize that it takes a lot more than that to get the work in. Actually, it isn't about the drone you've got, as you say. It's how you market yourself, because you could actually build, I think, a very good drone business without having a drone at all and without flying at all, and by renting people in when you need them to deliver for you. I'm convinced that is a business model that would work in this space. In fact, I might even try it at some point to prove it. But you don't need the shiniest drone. You need the messaging to be correct. And Eventually, yeah, you might be able to get your new drones, but you'd be probably better off hiring, leasing it maybe a
Yeah.
push. But you don't need getting. People, I think about it the wrong way around. They think that by getting the latest, shiniest drone that's £3,000, £4,000, $5,000, whatever it might be, that's going to bring the work in. No, you need to think about it the opposite way around. Start getting the work in to justify getting the equipment if you need to if you need to get that equipment at all, because you probably don't, to be brutally honest. I've always said I can take a better photo with my iPhone than and I think I might probably challenged you in the room on this when you came to the round tables in 2017 or whenever it was, the business training we did. I could take a better photograph with my mobile phone that's in my pocket than any of you could if I gave you my professional Nikon camera with a
Yeah.
professional lens on it, because I understand I've spent that time to learn composition, to learn photography and videography properly. And so it doesn't matter what kit you've got, it's about how you use it and
Yeah.
what
And
you can
it's
output
so
with
easy to be sucked into thinking I must
it.
have
Yeah.
one of these things. And if you feel that, you're going to have to get hold of a Mavic 3 Enterprise or whatever with an RTK on it, because that's part of your workflow, and we use that a lot, then, have a look for a second-hand one, because it will be half the price. And, they're pretty reliable, aren't they? I think just one other thing about the sort of, you mentioned, Matt, about the kind of sort of in terms of spreading the cost cycle across the business over a year, because certainly where we are in the UK, and I don't know what the weather's like in Canada, is it really cold where you are sometimes?
Yeah. Yeah. 6 months of the year,
Yeah,
it's brutally
but you
cold.
can't fly a drone 365 days of the year.
No.
I think a sensible way of looking at a business, certainly in the UK, is that if you could operate your drone for 100 or 120 days a year, what's the sort of income you can get off that? Because actually I think that's a realistic amount. I don't think you can operate it for a lot more than that. And one of the things we've done is we've branched out into ground-based laser scanning with Trimble stuff. We don't want to be a survey company, but it's a way of spreading out income in the winter, which is particularly
Nice.
important. And we certainly haven't bought one, that is for sure, because they're like
Yeah.
70 grand or something. So we just
Yeah.
hire one off, Sunbelt Rentals who do traffic lights and things like that.
Yeah.
But we've learned how to use it. It's not particularly difficult. It's like kind of a bit like Matterport. Some of you will know that. And as long as you've got the price point right, and that's what the client wants, and you can sell that service as part of another package of works that you're doing, that might be a way of smoothing out those income curves where the winter can be we found a bit desolate, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, I've always taught 120 days in the UK is what you need to factor in for flying.
That's probably where I got the figure from then, Matt.
Yeah, maybe. It's funny how that bounces down the road. Yeah, 120 days. So you have to work out, again, the maths is pretty simple. If you want to earn 60 grand a year, it's, or 100 grand, whatever it is, got to divide it by 120 at least before you take out tax and expenses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
To work out, what you need to be charging to be able to make it work. And then it's up to you, in my mind, to be able to deliver the value that justifies you charging that much. That's the again, another mindset shift that I think a lot of people.
And it's really hard, isn't it, to work out when you move from a single operator into a business, what the differential should be in terms of charging and costing for clients. But I think that most people as individuals grossly underestimate what their true value of time is, because they're not charging for travel, preparation, drone depreciation, insurance, all of those sorts of things. And when you look at all those things up, you find out as an individual, you're probably doing it for £4 an hour. And you just can't do that.
It's not sustainable.
So you need proper numbers on things in order to be able to say, and sometimes you look at, certainly the numbers we might charge to a client, I look at them and think, oh, that looks like quite a lot of money. But if the client is prepared to pay that, and critically what you said, Matt, they think this is a value proposition that solves a problem for them, they will pay it. And it's just about how you align that kind of price point with what they're getting. And that's why, definitely we don't say we're a drone company, because they go, oh, my mate will do it for 100 quid. So, you've got to move away from that.
Yeah, big time. I think as well, one of the other big points on this, and it's come up a few times, like how do you work out which drone to get? How do you work out whether you can afford it? Is it worth the? Is it a sound investment, or are you just doing it to get a dopamine hit of buying the latest drone? How much do you need to be charging? All that sort of stuff can very easily be solved with one piece of outside help, and that's getting an accountant that can help you.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to commit to having an accountant all the time, although you should certainly be aspiring to that. But for a couple of £100, a few $100, having a consultation with a good accountant who particularly understands the drone space is I think really helpful. It's something that I put off for a while, a bit like at first trying to shop around to find the cheapest insurance, and actually it's you're just pushing the can down the road. The problem hits you in a year's time when you've got a crap policy. It's the same with an accountant, right? Get a decent accountant, have a conversation with them. It doesn't cost a fortune, but it will save you. It is a sound investment to have that hour or two with an accountant, and most of them you'll find will give you an hour for free anyway, to start off with, and they will use them as the kind of the sounding board almost, or use them as the sensibility check to say, you don't need this drone, or you can't afford this drone, or yes, actually, I suggest you go and do that, or join, join this network.
And you were saying, Matt, that being an entrepreneur is lonely.
Yeah.
Or can feel lonely. And I think one of the things that I, certainly as part of our business development, it was crucial to me that I had someone else in the business at a similar level where we might not always get on with each other, but we can definitely sound each other out, and we have different backgrounds and strengths and weaknesses. We're not both I'm into drones, he's not into drones, all of those sorts of things, because you need that challenge, because it is, for me, liking the tech, it's very easy for me to go and spend money on stuff. And he's like, no, we don't need that. Does that give any more value to the client? And I'm like, no, not really.
Yeah, but I want it.
Yeah, but I want one of those toys, and all of that. So yeah, I think having someone else, even if it's not necessarily someone who's paid up in your business, but someone who can offer a mentor or sounding advice for you is really important, so that you're not a sole operator on this, because I think that's a really hard one to be.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're trying to build the Drone Business Network into what it is, right? So that people aren't alone, so that you have, if you're listening to this, somewhere to go to, someone or a bunch of people eventually, once we launch the actual community, to speak to and to sound ideas out with. So yeah, no, mate, David, it's been incredible, mate. Where can to speak to you, where can people find you and learn more about what it is that you guys do?
So yeah, I'm sure you can find us on LinkedIn. So if you looked up David Holmes geography on LinkedIn, because I've still got lots of kind of geography relics on there as well, and also InView Assets. We've got I don't know, about 1,000 followers on the company page as well, and our website is just inviewassets.co.uk. But I think, Matt, it's almost been a therapy session for me as well. I think this you should advertise this for your next people that you get on the pod to come in and do that. Just degas for an hour. It's right, decompress for an hour. And it's been useful to me, because it's made me think about things in a different way. But I think with business, and I'm sure you feel the same, is that I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't enjoying it, actually. And that really, really is important. If it's not, at the end of the day, fun as well as a challenge, then it's not really worth doing. And at the moment, it's still a fun, and it's still definitely a challenge. So yeah, enjoying it.
Good stuff, mate. Well, listen, I'll drop all of your links down below, so they'll be in the notes in the show notes inside Spotify if you're watching or listening on Spotify, and they'll be in the video description down if you're watching this on our YouTube channel for the Drone Business Network. But yeah, so that's it. That's the pod for today. A huge thanks to our special guest, David Holmes from InView Assets, for joining us today. Until the next time, I've been Matt Williams. Fly safe and blue skies.